from the First Street Studios in South Tampa, Florida, it's time for another round of Last Call 76 with your host, Dan, Jay, and behind the camera, the one and only Jess.
So, Dan, since 2017, we've seen the NHL expand twice. The Las Vegas, Nevada, the Vegas Golden Knights, and then Seattle, the Kraken. I love that name, Kraken. They may not be done, though, as now there's been a lot of grumblings, bumblings, and speculation that they're going to expand once more. Houston has been a name that's been floated out there a lot. But here's what's got people all up in an uproar, got their gander up. These people north of the border have, they're inflamed. The NHL is talking about bringing another hockey team to Atlanta. Now, this is why people are ticked off. Atlanta has had not one, but two franchises that have relocated, gone, not made it. So the question I want to pose that I think people are mad about, that people are posing, is why can't Quebec City get a team? It's been since 1995, 96, since the Nordiques packed up shop. So I want to kick it to you here. Atlanta looking to get a third team, even though they've, by technicality, and I'm going to say technicality with quotations there, I want to explain why they failed last time, but they've failed twice. Quebec City failed technically once, even though we go back to the 1920s and say they failed before. But that's, they failed twice in your lifetime and most of mine. Why are they getting another chance, and why is Quebec City not? Why is Hartford not getting another chance? I'm going to break this down real good.
Well, do you think, let's just call it the Southern expansion, is that fair?
Yeah.
It's not a Southern sport.
Yeah.
That's not what I meant. But getting back to what we talked about in previous shows, it's worked in Vegas. It's worked in Arizona, right?
Yeah.
It works in Texas. It's worked in Florida. Why doesn't it work in Atlanta? I don't understand that.
Last time was circumstantial.
Okay.
Last time was circumstantial, and I'll explain the backstory. And people may not want to hear this. They don't want to hear facts. They only want to go with this irrational logic that Gary Bettman has some kind of stick against the country of Canada. It ain't it at all. The Thrashers had a fan following. There's a reason the NHL had the All-Star game there. They don't put an All-Star game in a city if it doesn't have some kind of fan support, believe me. Arizona's never hosted one. Okay? They had an ownership group, Atlanta Spirit. Wanted to buy the Hawks. Didn't give two shakes of a baboon's rear end about the Atlanta Thrashers. But the owner said, look, you got to take both. You don't take both, you get none. So these people begrudgingly, reluctantly took on the Atlanta Thrashers. Well, to use the terminology, you've heard redheaded stepchild before, right? They treated the Thrashers like a redheaded stepchild, right? They treated the Thrashers like a 10-year-old kid would treat a pair of knitted socks that they get for Christmas Day. Throw it in the back of the closet, forget it. Well, then the Atlanta Spirit Group started heavily feuding. We're talking litigation, lawsuits, etc. Well, we're keeping the Hawks. Thrashers, get out. They literally evicted the Thrashers from their own stadium, arena. Nowhere to go, so they moved to Winnipeg. Was that necessarily Atlanta fans' fault?
No.
That's BS. No franchise would have survived under that circumstances. And that's why people say, well, Arizona had places to go. Atlanta didn't. So that's why I'm giving Atlanta a free pass for that. But here's why it didn't work, why it worked in Las Vegas, why it's worked in Seattle, why it worked in Tampa, why it worked in Miami. Time. And Vegas and Seattle had much more relaxed expansion draft availability than any other expansion team did. And I'm not saying they were given creme de la creme. We're not talking about Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid, and we're not talking prime Mario and prime Gretzky here, but they also weren't invited over to dinner and told to go eat out the garbage can like the Lightning were back in 1993, okay? They weren't told, here, you can come over and swim in the pool, but, instead of swimming in the pool, you got to stick your head in the toilet bowl and pretend you're swimming there. And that's what these people were doing back in 1990, or the expansion drafts were. Yeah, you get to pick, you get the big players, but you're getting, no disrespect to these players, I will never disrespect anybody that plays a professional sport, but you weren't exactly getting you were getting the last guys in the bottom of the totem pole that we're probably going to release anyway. That moonlighters that were taxi drivers during the year that moonlighted.
Well, be fair, B- C+ players.
And C- D+.
Okay, all right, here we go.
You're getting, that's not a disrespect to them, but you're not getting prime sirloin. You're getting crap that they throw away at the end of the night, okay? So now they've relaxed the rules a little bit, and they've given these teams a chance to compete fairly quickly, which is fair. Which is totally
good for the sport.
Good for the sport. It's good for the sport. So that's why the Golden Knights have jumped out, and they've made 2 Stanley Cup appearances in 5 years and won one. That's why the Kraken are playoff contenders in year 3. Other teams, they've had to take the road less traveled, and they've had to build their way up and build the markets. But why they're not getting a team, Dan, I'll tell you. I'll tell you why Quebec City's not getting a team. I'll tell you why Hartford, Connecticut's not getting a team. Listen, as much as people don't want to hear this, the Americanization of the National Hockey League has caused the game to grow. Look at the profits of the NHL at the beginning of the 1990s when Quebec was a team, when Hartford had a team, and look at it at the end of the semester, at the end of the decade. Look at how much of a profit margin there was, how much of a growth there was. It wasn't marginal, it was monumental. As much as we hate teams in the South, okay, as much as we hate teams in the Rust Belt, we cannot act like that did not factor in. Because we're putting teams in markets where there are big TV, where the TV market size is huge. Quebec City ain't it. Hartford ain't it. Right? I love the Whalers. When I was a kid, I used to love them.
Absolutely.
I used to love the fact they played in a freaking mall. They played in a mall. That was cool. But guess what? It didn't move the needle. And there was one thing that happened that we talked about in one of our other videos, our mailbags.
Is this where you're going to go with the Gretzky to LA?
Yes.
Go ahead.
That changed the whole demographic of this game. Wayne Gretzky getting traded to the Los Angeles Kings started the Americanization of hockey. Because they knew this guy playing in Edmonton, winning multiple Stanley Cups, believe me, the Edmonton Oilers in the 1980s were the dynasty.
Grant Fuhr, man.
Grant Fuhr, Mark Messier.
Yeah, greatest. I mean, it's hard to say.
But they were amazing. They were the team to beat, but it wasn't moving the needle. The games were still being played at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and being watched at 7 o'clock 2 days later, 3 days later. Now it's prime time. You can't go wrong with it. The team in LA, putting them in LA and Hollywood, we have a generation of kids who wouldn't even think of playing hockey, and sure as hell wouldn't be playing hockey in Tampa, Florida if they're the only team they had to watch was somebody from Quebec City, that now are in the National Hockey League. You can't tell me, Dan, that having teams in Arizona, Tampa, Miami, even Atlanta did not play a factor in that.
Yeah, and I'll just close on this. Hockey's becoming so popular down here where we grew up at skating rinks on Friday and Saturday nights, right?
Right.
Now we got skate plexes, ice skating arenas all over South Tampa and in the suburban areas. So I think we'll just go ahead and leave it here. I want to come back to it at some point, but we just for purposes of time and what we're trying to get done today.
Yep.
But we're going to go ahead and end here. But please subscribe if you like what we're saying. Send us comments, send us questions. Help us grow our show. We appreciate you. Thank you. This episode of Last Call was brought to you by SJP Snapshots and Minx Inc. Clothing and Apparel.